Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog. Like most knitters, I don't enjoy weaving in yarn tails. So, whenever possible, I try to minimize the number of tails I'll have to deal with at the end of a project. I'm currently knitting a pair of duck pond socks, which features these narrow bands of color. When I reach one of those narrow stripes, instead of cutting my main color yarn, joining the contrasting color yarn, knitting the stripe, then cutting the contrasting color and rejoining the main color, which would give me 4 yarn tails, I use a simple spit join to attach the contrasting color, and then I carry the main color on the inside of the sock. So instead of 4 yarn tails to deal with, I'll only have 1. Today, I'll show you how to use a partial spit join to attach one color yarn to another. As a bonus, stay tuned to the end because I'll also demonstrate how I carry the main color yarn as I'm knitting the contrasting stripe. Let's get started. Before we begin, if you enjoy our videos, consider joining the pack and becoming a member of thechilidog.com for ad-free access to our entire learning library, priority support, and more. I'm ready to start my next narrow contrasting stripe. But first, I need to attach my contrasting yarn. This yarn is primarily made of protein fibers, in this case, wool and yak. So a spit join is a good option. Please be aware, spit joins do not work well for cellulose fibers like cotton or man-made fibers like acrylic that won't felt. So first, make sure that you break the end of your new yarn instead of cutting it. This ensures the end has a nice wispy tip, which will blend into the join much better than a blunt cut. Next, to minimize any bulk in my first few stitches, I'm going to remove about half of the plies in the yarn. This yarn has 3 plies. Since that doesn't divide evenly in half, I'm just going to remove one of those plies. So I untwist the yarn a little bit and grab one of those plies. It may be helpful if you can't twist them apart to use a thin needle to separate them. I'm going to pull them apart for about 4 inches. And then again, this single ply, I'm going to break it rather than cut it. So I've removed about 4 inches of just one of those single plies. I like to pinch at the point where it transitions from 2 plies to 3 plies. That's happening right about here. Then we're going to wet the thinner section of yarn here at the tip. You can use a little bit of water, but enzymes in your saliva will help the yarn felt quicker as you do the spit join. So I've wet my yarn. Fold that wet yarn around the main color you're attaching it to, then back onto itself. And I like if that wispy tip goes just a little bit past the point where it transitions from 2 plies to 3 plies. And that makes a nice little loop. Then I'm going to twist so that the twist is in the same direction as the plies of the yarn. Finally, we're going to do the felting part. So you just vigorously rub this wet section between your hands, and it may take a couple seconds. At this point, the join is secure. I can pull here on the new yarn and nothing is coming apart. So once it's secure, I can slide the new yarn down towards my stitches and then begin knitting with the new yarn. As I work the very first stitch, I just want to make sure that the new yarn stays very close here to the base of the final stitch with the old color. So I'll work my first stitch. You can see here how as I work it, the yarn tends to move. That loop slides a little bit. So I'll work the first stitch, pull on the old yarn, and just make sure that that loop where the spit join is all the way down at the base, and then I'll let go of the main color yarn and continue working with the contrasting color. As I work each narrow stripe, I just want to make sure that the two yarns are linked around each other every other round. So the first time that I reach the unworked main color yarn, I know that those yarns were linked at the join before I started the previous round. So I'm just going to let the main color hang down here out of the way, and I'll continue working by bringing my new color just right over the top. There's no need to twist anything. And my first stitch happens to be a purl, so I'll bring the yarn forward and then just work around. The second time I reached the unworked main color yarn, the yarns were not linked in the previous round, so I need to twist them around each other. So imagine that you're looking straight down the yarns. You're going to twist them one time counterclockwise around each other. So they go one time around. And you can see here how they're linked together. So when I form the next stitch, the main color yarn is going to be trapped there in between the contrasting yarn and the stitch. So I knit my next stitch. If we look close, you can see how that main color yarn has been linked to the contrasting yarn. And then I can continue working around. The third time I reached that unworked main color yarn, I know that in the previous round, I twisted the two yarns around each other because I can see here that little twist of the contrasting yarn around the main color. So as I continue on, I'll just let the main color yarn hang down out of the way and continue working with my contrasting color in pattern. And in this case, my first stitch is a purl, so I'll bring my yarn forward and then purl and work around. The fourth time I reached the unworked main color yarn, I've finished my narrow contrasting stripe and it's time to switch colors. So I'll break my contrasting color and then I'll do a half twist the two yarns to link them together. So a half twist counterclockwise. And again, you're looking straight down the yarns as if that's the center of the clock. So I'll twist counterclockwise. When I make my first stitch with the main color, this contrasting yarn will be trapped in between the yarn and the first stitch. I'm just going to pull on that tail so there's no slack in there. As I'm working, the final contrasting stitch may elongate a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about that because later when I weave in my tail, I'll simply be able to pull on that yarn tail and it'll tighten up that last contrasting stitch. So I can tuck the yarn tail, my contrasting color, down into the inside of my sock. I'm done with it for now until I weave it in later, and then I can continue on with my main color. I hope you enjoyed learning how to do a partial spit join to minimize yarn tails for narrow stripes worked in the round. If you'd like to try this technique in a pattern, head over to the shop section of thechilidog.com and look for our duck pond socks. Until we stitch again, happy knitting!